Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a couple of different jobs. The first thing that I need to do is to straighten out all of these parts and get all the final finishing done on them so that I can actually start laying them out and assembling them into a lock. This is actually a little bit out of sequence. I did this last week before I made the drawing, but that video went a little long, so I decided to put the footage in this video. It really doesn't matter. I could have done it last week without cleaning it up, and it would have been close enough. But this is the first steps to putting together a machine that is going to function like a lock. The flat bar that I have laying on the table represents the line of travel of the push rod. It's also a straight edge, so I'm going to make sure that both of those sections are laying flat up against the bar. The other thing that I'm going to be able to do with this setup is to make sure that that top edge is perfectly flat and in line with that straight edge. If there's a rise or a dip anywhere along that top edge, it will bind with the guide that is running over it. And the last thing that I need to do with this piece is make sure that every section is laying perfectly flat up against the table and the entire cross section is one even thickness. So that means I have to file or grind out any irregularities and then twist in whatever direction I need to make sure that all the sections are in line with each other. So this is the basic setup that I'm using at the vise. That square bar is doing two things. It's serving as a straight edge, so it's a file guide, and it's also raised up slightly from the jaws of the vise, so it's preventing me from filing into the jaws. So this is basically what I'm seeing in the jaws of the vise. Anything that isn't straight is sticking up above the top edge of this square bar. The way you get something awkward like this set up in the vise is to get it as close as you can. You don't have to worry about getting it perfect right now. But once it's in the jaws, and the jaws are open wider than they need to be, you steady it by jamming it in the jaws of the vise the way it is. So I've turned it counterclockwise. So the right-hand side is jammed up against the front jaw, and the left-hand side is jammed against the back jaw. And then when it's held in that position, I have a free hand to be able to turn the screw of the vise. And I just set it up very lightly, and then I hammer the pieces where they need to go. When I'm happy with that, I clamp it all the way, and then I start working. And as you can see, I can tell right away once I'm down to the level of the straight edge. So that works well on sections that fit nicely in the vise, but on short sections like this that can't straddle the vise jaws, it gets to be a little awkward. But the tool that I use mostly for this type of work is the vise jig that I featured in an earlier video. It's not very complicated, it's just a piece of angle iron with a couple of square bars coming out either side. The square bars allow me to position a hold down tool on either side anywhere that I need to have it on that table. And the holes along the front edge of the table allow me to position stops if I need to have another point to keep the piece from rotating around in the clamp. The only problem with this setup is that I don't have a convenient way of clamping a straight edge alongside of the piece without milling out a piece that's the right thickness. So I need to use a pair of dividers and check my progress quite regularly. But on short pieces it really isn't that much of a problem. So this is the process that I'm going to be using to clean up all the rough forgings that I have so far so that I can get them ready to start assembling them into the lock. The next thing that I wanted to work on today was to rough out the 3 bolts that are going to be inside of this lock. The push rod that I just finished is going to be working levers that are going to be pulling these 3 bolts into the lock. And as you can see, this is just a basic sawing operation. I'm going to get the 3 bolts out of this short length of 1/2 by 1 flat bar. And each bolt is 2 inches long, and you can see that I have that already marked out on the bar. To lay out the other main dimensions, I'm going to be using a surface gauge simply because it is the simplest way to lay out a number of dimensions that need to be exactly the same. A surface gauge is basically just a scribe that can be locked into a certain position. It's fully adjustable, so you can set up whatever height that you want, and then when you slide the surface gauge along the surface, it'll scribe that line along the workpiece. So here I'm a little further along, and I have all the dimensions that I need to start cutting out this piece. I'm going to be cutting this piece out on the bandsaw, but this could easily be cut out with a hacksaw. Just make sure that you get a brand new blade, and that'll make the job a lot more enjoyable. In either case, you leave the layout lines and then you file down to them later on. So here I have all 3 bolts roughed out. The top edge of the bolt has a lip, and that lip is going to prevent the bolt from sliding out of position when the lock is opened. There's going to be a guide around this bolt, and that edge is going to butt up against the side of that guide. The notch at the bottom of the bolt is what wraps around the top lip of the box, and that's what locks the lid in place. So that's why this piece needs to be so wide. It has to wrap around a fairly large lip, and there has to be enough there to guide the bolt in and out. You also need to have enough thickness to be able to have a fairly large bevel that will allow the bolts to snap into position when you close the lid. The last thing that I need to do to rough out the bolts is to thin down the tail section. I'm not going to be leaving the 1/2 inch thickness here. I want to trim that down so it's a little more slender. I'm not working to an exact dimension here, so I'm just going to pick out a line that looks good and lay it in with a Sharpie. Once I have the first line, I'll use that to lay out all the other ones. So here you can see how I laid out those cuts. The bolt that fits in the top center of the lock has the tail in the center of that bolt. The right-hand side has the tail facing the top edge of the bolt, and the left-hand bolt is the mirror image of the right-hand bolt, and it also has the tail sitting at the top. And I think they did stuff like this just to keep them from getting mixed up in the lock when they were doing the final fitting. These 2 bolts can only fit in one position, and of course the center bolt only fits in that one position, so it's very obvious which one goes where. So from here I'm going to be doing a lot more filing to get everything down to their final dimensions, and at that point I should have everything that I need to start assembling this lock, so that's what I'll be working on next time. Hi, I'm Dennis, and thanks for watching. If you're interested in supporting this channel, the simplest way, of course, is to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have questions and you want to contact me directly, you can do so by emailing me at either one of the addresses that I have listed here. It may take me a couple of days, but I will get back to you. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.